I'm Logan Crawford, and right now on Spotlight, I am talking to the man who is behind a wonderful novel that is set in World War I. It is called Whistles of War and Peace by Jack Harrison. It is the story of two best friends who set off for war, and as the world has changed, their lives are changed as well. Jack Harrison, thank you so much for joining us here today on Spotlight.
Thank you very much, Logan. It's a privilege to be on your program, and I've been looking forward to it.
Same here. It's my pleasure, my privilege, sir. I love your book. Tell me why you write about World War I. It's 100 years ago, but you make it feel like it was just 2 months ago, which I think is a terrific connection to the past.
Well, for most of the surviving soldiers, or Tommies as they were called, most of them are dead now who served. But one of my granddads served on the Somme in 1916, and my other granddad served on the cross-channel boats that carried troops and dispatches and various things. So I have two links with the First World War.
Absolutely. Now, these two best friends who set off for war and each presumes the other is dead, are they modeled after people in your life? Was it completely out of your imagination? Tell me a little bit about the process of writing this book.
Well, I'm aware that 250,000 boys raised their age and ran off to war. Some of them changed the name so they couldn't be traced by their parents. And as a result, many parents who turned up with their birth certificates, they still couldn't find them because they changed the names. So, as I said, I was aware of that before I wrote the book. But again, I've always had this link, through my family. Granddad, Mather, who was on the Somme himself, he never once spoke about it, and many never did. Many came back and just wanted to leave it behind. A lot of them came back and either went to drink or even kill themselves because it was, there in their mind when they came back. Many troops who were given award, decorated for brave acts and even wounded several times, so they would have a badge on the uniform. Some of those were actually shot at dawn for later cracking under fire and being found behind the lines. So there's lots in there that is actually true. So although the novel is based on fictitious characters, it's set amongst true events. I even found the regiment that they would have joined had they joined from local. The 7th Regiment was of the Loyal Lancashire Regiment. And this came after the first lot were the regulars, the second lot were the part-time soldiers, not volunteers.
Basically reservists.
Yeah, that's it. That's the word. Reservists, sorry.
That's okay.
And then later came all the volunteers. They were known as Kitchener's Army, and a lot of the regular troops didn't have much to say for them because they were untrained, and they joined up in the bravado of the atmosphere. So they joined up, and as I say, it wouldn't have been until the second year they joined that they actually went to France. They had to be 19 to go to France. Now then, considering how many times the boys put their ages up, I don't know if it's too widely known, but the youngest who joined and ran away, he was 12. There are other cases. I've checked this through the Imperial War Museum. It was them that told me about the 12-year-old. There was also 13-year-olds. Now then, I fail to see how someone in the recruiting office could pass, boys of 12, 13, but it happened.
They probably were purposely turning a blind eye to it
Yeah,
because recruits were so
absolutely.
needed. It was such an
Yeah.
all-out effort.
But by that time, there would have been, you know, a lot of the divisions would have been slaughtered, you know, tens and thousands per day. We know what the results of the first Battle of the Somme. Well, the Battle of the Somme actually went from the 1st of July into November. But on that first day, there was 60,000 either killed or injured or disappeared. The effects of those artillery could it could be anything to just shell shock to simply vaporization, and this is,
Unbelievable.
you know what I mean. So as I say, they went through the bodies in large numbers, and I'm afraid that's all they were.
Unbelievable. I mean, like you said, large numbers of people were killed, large numbers of people were injured, both physically and mentally. They came back with scars, both visible and invisible. And I think you say in your book, the war isn't over when the armistice is signed. The
That's
war
true.
continues. Tell
It,
me a little bit about the afterlife of soldiers and how they carry it with them.
Well, as I say, in my own case, I can vouch for this, that me granddad, who was on the Somme, or granddad mother, he would never speak of it. I used to sit on his knee when I was about 3, and he'd sit and roll his cigarettes for the day, and he'd talk about all kinds of things. But whenever that subject came up, as far as he was concerned, that was it. Change the subject.
Yeah, a lot of soldiers are like that. They don't want to talk about it. What happened there stays there. But I think in many ways, if they could talk about it, it'd be somewhat therapeutic. They'd be able to purge the burden of carrying whatever
Yeah.
darkness they have inside of them from this experience.
Well, as an example of that, you had the two, probably the two greatest war poets were Siegfried Sassoon and Wilfred Owen. They went to Craig Lockhart in just outside Edinburgh, and it was called the Talking Cure, and they were put through various what we would know today as client-centered counselling and psychotherapy and things like that, and they would be encouraged to bring it out in other ways through some would be hypnotized and things like that, and various ways of getting them to come out with it and realize that it wasn't such a bad thing to talk about it, until later on they found that talking about it, and then like I say, that the likes of your great war poets, they found that they could talk about it through the poetry. And the fact that they were both at Craig Lockhart together, they came out with some of the most famous works.
Mm.
So again, that being a poet author myself, that again got the interest, kept it going.
Absolutely. Now, you're working on a book of poetry yourself, or you've actually recently published one. Tell me about your work.
I published it. I actually finished it in 2017. And then it was I sort of left it and carried on working for it, but it was actually published 2 years ago in 2020. Now,
What's the subject of these poems? Tell me a little bit about the subject matter.
well, I've always written poetry and stories and things ever since I was a kid myself, but it wasn't until 2017 that I actually started to publish. That was the year of my first book, and that was all poetry. It was called Lines of, oh heck, it's oh grief. No,
we can find most of your work on Amazon,
yeah,
that's for sure, by looking up Jack D. Harrison. But
I'll let you into a secret here, and viewers. The thing is, when I write a piece of work, I tend to move on.
yeah, same here. Once it's created,
Yeah,
that energy goes into the next creation. It
right.
doesn't stay behind. I think that's true with a lot of artists and creators and authors. You
Yeah.
seem to be a little bit of an expert on World War One. This is not your first book on World War One, as I understand it, correct?
No, well, I mean, most of my poetry originally was around World War One, but me, I mean, I have interest in the Second World War as well because my dad was in the Fleet Air Arm in Ceylon. He went out there about 1944, thereabout, um, and there's an interest in in that. But I've always I never sit down and write a poem on a particular subject. It comes into my head based on, say, for example, people might post a photograph on Facebook and something will come to my mind, you know what I mean? Or somebody might say something to me. And again, it literally just comes to me. It's very rare that I actually sit down and say, I'll write a poem on this or that subject. It just never happens. I don't decide what I write about, if that makes sense.
It does. I mean, I think what you're talking about is inspiration, and that sometimes you just get inspired. It's not a process of thinking and working and trying to come up with certain lines on a certain topic, but instead it's just what has inspired you and what you're
Yeah.
feeling in your heart and what's feeling in your mind, and you put that down on paper. I think actually that's the best way to write.
Yeah, it tends to come across more natural, and the other thing is, it might come to me during the night. I mean, my sleep is all messed up because I've lived with back injuries for quite a while. I had to leave the railway in 1988 because of back injuries, and very often I can't sleep during the night with back pain. So a story, a poem or an idea might come to me at that point, and you've got to stay on it. If you put it aside and think I'll do it tomorrow, then by the time tomorrow comes, you've lost it.
Right. A
Or
lot
you've
of writers like to work either at night or early morning because
yeah.
they feel that dream state that they're in is kind of part of the inspiration. Do you feel the same way?
Yeah. I mean, sometimes certain music can, put ideas into my head. A lot of Vaughan Williams and the likes of Vaughan Williams. A lot of his music was written about with the war in mind. I mean, he lost friends. He was in the ambulance service himself, so he has first-hand experience. And other writers, composers, and I suppose to a point I was influenced or inspired by those. So it all feeds into it.
Absolutely. I find the same way with music. If I'm writing a piece, perhaps on the 1980s, I'll listen to the 80s music while I'm doing it. And for me, it'll transport me back. I'll remember how I was feeling when I was on dates when I was 20
Right.
years old or
Yeah.
a teenager. Music really has this great power to transport you back to another time.
Absolutely. I mean, I can write poems on all, a wide range of subjects, not just the war, but for example, around around Christmas time, I had a mouse in the house. Well, I live in a bungalow, and I wrote a poem about this mouse this particular night, and I put it on Facebook, and I don't know how many likes I got for it, lots and lots. Just simple things, you know what I mean? Sometimes they're quite ridiculous.
Right.
But
But you know what? You, I like how you don't self-edit. If you have a ridiculous thought, write about it.
yeah,
Because I'm sure a lot of great creations in this world were ridiculous to one person and a masterpiece to another. And
absolutely.
like you said, you were talking about inspiration. I mean, certainly Christmas time is a time when our hearts are filled, our
Yeah,
minds are filled with Christmas's past. And
yeah,
that I find
very
writing
much.
about Christmas, thinking about Christmas, listening to Christmas music, I find it all very inspiring, and it brings out the artist in me. And it sounds like it brings out the artist in you as well.
Yeah, I've written a few poems about Christmas. In fact, one of them was one of them was about a drunken Father Christmas, and in terms a, of a little old, a fat little old man who was arrested. He was arrested one night with a sleigh and reindeers, and it turned out that it actually escaped from an old people's home. So every time he escapes every Christmas to deliver presents, and then he's taken back into his home for the rest of the year. But
That's fantastic. I love that story.
Again, it's that you know, all these ideas just come from the most weird places.
Right. Right. Well, like I said, you know, I'm an avid reader. I'm a writer myself. And the people who let themselves go there when it comes to having strange thoughts, bizarre thoughts, different thoughts are the best writers, because everybody out there has ordinary thoughts. But I love the story of a old man who gets out of the nursing home once a year at around Christmas time and is basically Santa Claus, but nobody knows it. They just think he's a bum on the street, if you will, right?
Excuse me.
Sure.
You don't mind.
Have a sip. Absolutely. We do a lot of talking on the show, and sometimes I also need to cough or I need to have a drink of water for sure.
Yeah.
Your book is wonderful. I downloaded it on Kindle. It is called The Whistles of War and Peace. It's by Jack D. Harrison. Jack, you must be very, very proud of this work, I imagine.
I am. I often wish Mum and Dad were still alive. I'd like them to have seen it. But Mum, the last of them died in 2011. So that was before any of the publishing had begun. But it would have been nice for them to see. You know, I would have liked that.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think when we get to a certain age, that's what we all look at, is that when we have a success, even when we have a failure, you always wish your parents were there. That's something that never leaves you. And I think that's part of your writer's heart, is that connection to your mom and dad and connection to your family.
I mean, for all I know, my mom's probably looking down now and saying, I don't like this or I like that.
Exactly, exactly. Well, I hope the book does great. I hope it sells 1 million or more copies. I hope your mom and dad are up there hoisting a pint and toasting to you and wishing you well, Jack D. Harrison. It's been a pleasure speaking with you today on Spotlight. People can get your book on Amazon.com. You can get the physical copy of the book, or you can download it on Kindle like I did. It's a wonderful read. It'll transport you back 100 years ago, and you will love the story of these two best friends and the girl who brought him a pint of beer on the house when he returned from war.
Thank you very much.
My pleasure, Jack. And I'm Logan Crawford, thanking you for your time this time. Until next time on Spotlight.